favorite books of all time is written by author Elizabeth Gilbert. She's best known for her book, Eat, Pray, and Love. But I find her book written on creativity is one of the most powerful things I've ever read. Her book, Big Magic, is subtitled Creative Living Beyond Fear. And she begins her book by asking a question that she was given early on in her career by one of her professors. Do you have the courage to bring forth the treasures that are hidden within you? Do you have the courage to bring forth the treasures that are hidden within you? Elizabeth Gilbert goes on to make the statement that this is the single question upon which all creative living hinges. You see, the divine creative loving intelligence has placed within us, in every single one of us, a treasure that's waiting to be expressed, a hidden jewel. And the search for that treasure, the willingness to look for it in the first place, is what Elizabeth Gilbert says separates the mundane existence from a more enchanted one. You see, we didn't come here to play small. We didn't come here to be mundane. We came here to allow that divine expression of spirit to move through us. That force that created everything did not spend its time and energy bringing us into existence so that we could live an unfulfilled life. This is the very reason that we create. It is the very reason that we are creative, and that everything we do is an act of creation. In his book, The Philosophy of Ernest Holmes, our founder actually asked and answers this question: why do we create? Unless we live creatively, we die, because there is an irresistible desire to express life. That's how fundamental and profound it is. Unless we live creatively, we die. Now again, the act of creating does not have to be something that has never been seen before, something that sets you above all others, something through which others can't help but be in awe of you. Because you see, that's a very scary idea. Thinking that anything I create has to be earth-shattering or profound, well, that's darn right scary. And who am I to think that I am that great, or that I am that important, that the divine spirit put that idea in me to bring it forth? You know, in her beautiful quote, Marianne Williamson speaks to this very idea. She asks, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God, and your playing small does not serve the world. This is what we've come here to be and to do, is to be that place through which spirit shows up. But it's our fears that hold us back from creating the life that acknowledges and honors the gifts that have been bestowed upon us. But creativity and fear are born at the same time. That creative spark, that brief blast of inspiration, it floods our consciousness, and riding the wave of possibility that exists in that flash exists right there and then, our old inner friend, fear. And so our natural inclination would be to want to get rid of the fear, to eliminate it totally out of our life, and not give it a place to operate in our experience. It's only natural that we would want to get rid of it. But we here at Centers for Spiritual Living have a saying that goes like this: what you resist, persist. And so every time we try to battle our fears, every time we engage in eliminating our fears, every time that we try to overcome them in some way that takes them out of our experience, we find that they're still attached. And they're often manifesting themselves in other ways besides that creativity. So when we're trying to resist it, when we fight it and we battle it, sometimes it becomes more of a thing than it was in the first place. And when it comes to our creative expression, I believe that it's important that we begin to build a space within our consciousness where that fear of what might happen and that creativity, that infinite possibility that is existing right there, where these two things can begin to coexist. This is a place where fear is there, but it's not inhibiting the expression of what's wanting to come through us. It's right there with it. And there may be a little bit of trepidation, but sometimes that force of fear can be an impetus to move us to the next level of our expression. Elizabeth Gilbert has a fabulous way of describing how she allows fear and creativity to coexist whenever she's engaging in a new endeavor. She calls it the road trip. And in her book, Big Magic, she has a letter that she has written to fear about the next upcoming road trip. She's inviting fear to join her in creativity as they embark on their journey. Let me share just a little bit of that with you. It's so well written. There is plenty of room in this vehicle for all of us, so make yourself at home. She's speaking to fear. But understand this, creativity and I are the only ones who will be making any decisions along the way. I recognize and respect that you are part of this family, and so I will never exclude you from our activities, but still, your suggestions will never be followed. You're allowed to have a seat, and you're allowed to have a voice, but you are not allowed to have a vote. You are not allowed to touch the road maps. You are not allowed to suggest detours. You are not allowed to fiddle with the temperature controls. Dude, you are not even allowed to touch the radio. But above all else, my dear old familiar friend Fear, you are absolutely forbidden to drive. What a wonderful way of expressing this idea of bringing fear along, but not allowing it to control you. You know, fear almost always shows up when we're trying anything innovative. It doesn't matter what that thing is. It could be cooking or redecorating your house. It could be an artistic endeavor or something that you're trying to write. Fear is always triggered by creativity because creativity asks us to step into the unknown. And if we spend too much time resisting our fear and not taking that step into the next great expression, we inhibit our creativity. Overcoming our fear is essential to allowing us to create. But overcoming doesn't mean that we have to eliminate it altogether. We can invite it along on the ride, give it a space to be, compartmentalize it, if you will. But don't get caught up in what fear is dictating to us. The other thing that has a tendency to inhibit our creative expression is getting caught up in what the end product is going to be. Creativity is so woven throughout all of our lives and all the different aspects of our lives. And if we focus too much on what that end product of any creative endeavor is going to be, we are dealing with that idea of perfectionism. And perfectionism can inhibit us in so many ways. Can you imagine what your life would feel like if every single thing in it had to be absolutely perfect? You know, there are things that we love to do in our lives that we really want to be perfect. Things that are so meaningful to us and to the people that we're creating them for, that we want everything to be just right. And I know that there are many, many people who spend countless amounts of time and energy living in that idea that everything has to be perfect. I can't imagine how exhausting that must be. But how would it be if we could more easily and more readily embrace the idea that the process was much more important than the outcome? What if we allowed ourselves to engage in, to actually spend our precious life energy doing, if we weren't worried about failing? What would our life be like if we weren't afraid of the outcome of anything that we started? I once read somewhere that done is better than good, and I really had a hard time with that because I grew up thinking that it had to be done and good. This changed for me, I guess about 6 years ago now, when I took up the practice of pottery. You see, I don't know anyone who's ever spent much time on a potter's wheel and ever thought that the piece that they had just created was absolutely perfect. Because you see, as the wheel is spinning and you actually feel the clay moving beneath your fingers, you instantly sense those places where the pot is thicker or thinner, where you can see that maybe the walls are just a little bit weaker, and you can instantly feel where the pot is just a little bit off balance. Because of that fast circular motion there of the clay, it is so easy to feel the imperfections in the clay wall, in the pot that you're creating, the piece you're creating. But pottery, if you spend too much attention on those places that you feel are not perfect, well, that's when utter chaos ensues and you end up with a pile of mud on your wheel. We can't try to make it absolutely perfect as long as we're in the process of creating it. Making a pot a little more perfect, removing some of those imperfections, happens after the clay has become dry and we start to trim the pot on the wheel. Then you can begin to fine-tune those places. But when you're in the process of creating that pot in the first place, you cannot focus too much on the perfection of it. It will not work. At least it hasn't in my experience of it. And I wound up with a lot of flumps on the pottery wheel because of that. But when I focused on getting the pot to approximately the height and the width and the shape that I was looking for, the vision that I had in my mind when I started, I was generally quite satisfied when it was done. In fact, having a done pot on a pottery wheel is a very, very satisfying experience. And it doesn't matter whether anyone else thinks it's good or not. When we persist in trying to eliminate our fears, we find more fears. When we persist in trying to make something perfect, we find more imperfection. But when we persist in completing our act of creation, we find something amazing. We find a creative life. And as Elizabeth Gilbert says near the end of her book, a creative life is an amplified life. It is a bigger life, a happier life, an expanded life, and a heck of a lot more interesting life. Living in this manner, continually and stubbornly bringing forth the jewels that are hidden within you, is a fine art in and of itself. Because creative living is where big magic will always abide. And so let's take this into prayer, into our spiritual mind treatment, and see what unfolds as we open up ourselves to the impress of Spirit. So I invite you to just turn within. I do that by closing my eyes and feeling my breath moving through my chest. And so I know that right here and right now, there is only one thing happening. It is the action and the activity of the divine. It is that creative love intelligence that has brought forth everything into experience. It is that isness and allness and fullness and wholeness of life, creatively expressing itself in new and wondrous ways. It is the breath that is moving through each aspect of this life. It is all that is. And because I know that there is only this one thing, I know that I am one with it. That creative love intelligence resides right at the very heart of my being and has brought me forth into existence to be a place through which it shows up. And as I know this is true for me, I know this is true for each and every person. That we are all that channel for that creative flow of energy, moving itself into expression in, through, and as each one of us, in perfection, in wholeness, in unique and amazing ways. And so knowing this, I speak my word of truth. I know that right here and right now, each one of us is a divine channel for the creative expression of spirit to move itself into fruition right here and right now. I know that each one of us is opening ourselves up in greater and greater ways to allow the impress of spirit and for us to allow it to be that creative expression of our lives. It is what we are here for. It is why we were brought to earth. In this time, in this place, in this way, as this person, we are absolutely perfect and divinely orchestrated to be that place through which God shows up. And I just give great thanks for this knowing. I'm so grateful to feel it. I'm so grateful to see it happening in our community. I'm so grateful to know that this is the truth. And I release this word into the law, into that creative mind of spirit that always says yes. I let it go and I let it be. And so it is. Amen.